conclusion from these basic facts. And they are facts of history. What I've just told you about Jesus dying, the empty tomb, the tomb, being buried in a tomb, and the disciples believing in a resurrection, those are just facts that modern scholarship believe in. You know, it's only fringe scholars like atheists that just don't agree with that. But so we're not saying, I'm not saying that Jesus rose from the dead at this point. I am now. All I'm saying is we can establish factually that Jesus died on a cross. We can establish factually that he was in the tomb. We can establish factually that the early church believed in a literal resurrection of Christ. We can establish that historically, very, very solidly. It's a certainty that that's historical bedrock, all right? And even if you disagree with me, you've got a big problem, because you're going to have to deal with E.P. Sanders and the rest of the modern scholarship that's around. But I've got to that by my method. And from there, I am now going to deduce certain things from these three simple facts. If our historical source material is early source, is reliable, and based on eyewitness accounts, fits the historical context, and accords with scholarship of most scholars, I conclude the following. Either the disciples were lying, but this makes no sense. Why lie? What would they gain? They gain no money, sex, or power, which people who start new movements are often after. If you were lying, why would you preach your prophet died a criminal? People would have seen this as silly. So why did they preach it? If they lied, the enemies could have just produced the body of Jesus, and that would have been them exposed. Why preach in Jerusalem? All of your lies would have been exposed in no time. How come no one recanted of these so-called lies? Those who said they saw the golden plates of the Mormon Joseph Smith, some recanted. But then again, the next possible hypothesis is that they were deluded, had some illusion or vision. If this is the case, why did they insist, and here's a point, why did they insist on a real resurrection? The disciples were defeated by Jesus' death. They had been beaten by this. They were not in a fit state to have visions or grief-induced illusions. As they were so disappointed, so lost, so shattered, they were in no mental state to be induced by such phenomenon. We see in the Markan text how Peter was a coward and the other disciples are a coward and run away, and we see even after during the resurrection the disciples would not believe. So it's obvious that they were not in a mental state to have visions or illusions. They were just not expecting anything. They were so shattered and so broken that they were not in any fit state, and that's just what we get from the text. So the next possibility is that Jesus did rise from the dead, and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense why Peter was a coward one minute and bold the next. It makes sense they put Mary as the first witness because she just was. It happened. It makes perfect sense the disciples did not believe Jesus rose from the dead, as they were crushed by Jesus' death and were not expecting anything. Mark is just telling us what really happened. Now you might say miracles do not happen, but that is a philosophical argument. A philosophical argument that, if it be honest, does not know, you know, here's a point. This is not in my lecture, but I'm going to just fill this out a little bit in detail. But if you say that miracles cannot happen, that is a philosophical argument, not a historical argument. And that philosophical argument is based on uniformity of nature, because nature is uniform and we don't see miracles happening anyway. The possibility of a miracle happening is just virtually impossible. But if we look at the quantum level of nature, beyond the quantum level, we don't know how nature interacts and matter interacts with each other. There's a point at which we do not know. And so therefore it is possible that something breaks into nature that we have not understand, which goes beyond the quantum level. And so therefore we should be open to the possibility of a miracle. Now you might say, well, a miracle is a supernatural event, but I would define a miracle as a sign. And so there's an important distinction there. And a miracle as a sign, it is possible that something within nature has happened, taken place, that is gone beyond the, it is beyond the quantum level of matter, that we don't understand, that breaks into our history and is a sign. And the only possible way that you can assess that is by looking at the historical data, not arguing from a philosophical point of view. And it's interesting to note that there's only one person in history who's ever really honestly tried to investigate miracles in a real honest way with a criteria for assessing miracles, and that is David Hume. When David Hume assessed the miracles of the time of Pascal, he had 5 to 7 criteria of assessing miracles, and when he assessed the miracles amongst the French Catholics of Pascal's time, he found that the French Catholics' miracles actually fulfilled his criteria, but yet nobody became, Hume did not believe in miracles, even though the miracles fitted his criteria. The point that I'm trying to make is, if you're going to disprove miracles, you've got to disprove it on historical grounds. But nobody since Hume has ever, any atheist has ever come up with a criteria for assessing miracles. So there's a disingenuousness there from skeptics. They say that